Welcome back to Tigs Bits. This is going to be a fun show. It's a podcast about podcasts. Yep, that's right. Chad and I are taking the Seinfeld approach, and we're going to talk about our favorite podcasts, besides this amazing one, of course. But before we get into it, don't forget to follow or subscribe to the show. Check out the short clips on all of the social media channels and leave some comments on them. Share them on your pages. Help us grow the show. So with all of that said, let's get into it. Chad, what's happening, man?
What's happening, brother? How you doing, man?
I think that was a good take, number one.
That was a good take. That was a great take.
I very rarely do I nail the intro on the first take. And I mean, sure, I could fidget around and make that better, but who cares? Look, we're going to talk about podcasts, man. So we're having a
podcast about podcasts. I like it.
Absolutely. So look, we're missing our compadre, Mr. JR the Handler, tonight. He's on tour with Justin Moore currently. So, sometimes things just don't work out. A few technical issues here and there. And that's show business, folks. But the show must go on. And here we are.
Absolutely.
Chad has once again stepped up from some random hotel room to do the show, which is great because he's always on the road. So, where are you at tonight, Chad?
Man,
where is this lovely place?
I'm in lovely Pensacola Beach, Florida, at Spring Hill Suites Marriott, right here on the beach. I didn't get the Gulf view. They were kind of full when I booked the room, but I did get the island view with a balcony so I can see the Gulf to my right, so I get on my balcony and there's the Gulf right there.
Peek at the Gulf.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see it.
A little peeky at the Gulf. Nothing
they still
wrong
hook
with
me
that.
up. Those folks at Marriott are always so...
Bonvoy, Marriott, great accommodations. Probably won't get your catalytic converter stolen there tonight either. So that's a good thing. Let's talk about some podcasts, man. So... Number one, the first thing, how do you listen to podcasts? How do you consume your podcasts? Do you watch them? Do you listen to them? Do you listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube? Do you watch social media clips and you never really listen or watch a full episode? How do you consume the podcast?
Well, that's a good question. So, for me, most of the time that I listen to podcasts, I'm driving and I'm on the road because I spend a lot of time on the road. And I typically use Apple Podcasts, and I just listen to it. It's not really a good idea to try to watch a show and drive down the road. So for me, like even the initial podcasts that I started listening to were always on Apple, and they still are, until we started doing this show, and or you started doing the show, I started doing it with you, but I didn't really watch podcasts. So it's always been something I've listened to. Same thing as like audiobooks or whatever. I like to listen to books, on Audible, while I drive. Yeah. So I have good windshield time. I'm productive. I hopefully learn something as I'm driving instead of just staring at the road. So that's kind of how I roll.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way too. If a lot of times if I'm working in here, I have a podcast on. I consume them because I put this show out on all of them. They go out. There isn't one really that I can think of that it's not out on at this moment. But I put it out on all of them. I primarily listen to them on Spotify. How many shows would you say that you listen to in a week religiously?
For me, it's funny, all the things that we talk about on the show and all the crazy stuff we get off into. You'd think I would listen to a lot of really crazy, different, variety shows, but I'm really dialed into crime dramas. I like to dig into those, and there's one. It's this guy. He's a Canadian guy, and it's Someone Knows Something, and he does such a good job, man. He doesn't just tell the story. He doesn't just pick up on, like, let's say a missing person or whatever it is. He gets in there. He talks with the family. He dives deep into it. And dude, he actually uncovers new information that usually helps to lead to more clues, which has also led to actually solving those cases. And so he's really thorough in what he does. And so I really enjoy that, man, and I listen to that cat. He's got multiple seasons. I just discovered him recently. So he's got probably 10 seasons, and I've listened to probably 5 of them in the last 2 or 3 months. That's kind of been some of my road action.
Hey man, those kind of shows are fantastic
Oh
for
yeah,
road
especially get a
driving.
guy that really gets dialed in. They don't just tell the stories from the news clippings and talk about it and give their opinion. Like this dude, no, he goes to the spot, he interviews with the family, he goes back. Let's
Yeah.
readdress things. Let's reinvestigate. Let's bring out cadaver dogs. Let's do the whole deal, and they usually uncover something. I mean, it's like he's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
thorough, and he's good at the way he presents it. And he's really good with the families and how he talks to them. They open up to him. They trust him.
Right.
He just does a great job. I mean, he's just a Canadian cat, and he comes down and hangs out in
Yeah.
Kentucky, and these folks trust him. So I'm really impressed by the guy. So
Yeah.
he does a great job. But other than that, I was listening to what's the one? It was a guy from CNN, Godfather of Soul, James
Other
Brown.
than James Brown, yeah.
The James Brown mystery, dude. I don't know if you ever listened to that podcast, but that is
No, I haven't.
mind blowing.
Huh.
That mind blowing. Like all the things around James Brown's life and leading up to his death, it is unbelievable. So that's a great one. So I like these ones that are kind of out
Yeah.
there, like so
Yeah.
that. And there was one serial that was on years ago,
Oh
but
yeah, no,
it's still out there.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
cereal's fantastic.
it
Yeah, no,
is.
I'm
It
with
is
you.
good.
I'm with you. I don't think that these true crime dramas are just. I don't think that the target audience is just women.
No,
And
it's
that's all that I say. That's all that I see it really presented to. Damn, here's a little truth bomb, a little secret into the Tiggy life. I go to bed every night to either American Greed, or most of the time I go to bed with Forensic File. Stacy Keach with American Greed, that guy is like pure silk in my
yeah.
ear, and he just puts me to sleep. It's the most interesting stuff on earth, but I can also sleep through this guy. And then they were murdered, and it was like, okay, Stacy, back up, man. But he makes it sound so smooth. I haven't. There has to be. He is. Stacy Keach, if you're listening to this anywhere, if this gets back to you, you are the dream interview for Tiggy and Tigs Bits. I would kill to have you on here. Not really wouldn't kill, Stacy. Or it wouldn't deceive or cheat, but I would absolutely love to have him on here.
Kill, deceive, or
let's
cheat.
just get it out there, Stacy Keach. I don't want anybody to misunderstand.
There's no story here. There's no story
It's
here.
simply
We
just,
wanna talk to you.
I just want to thank him, first of all. And then I want, for the countless nights of good sleep, unrelated to podcasts, but back to true crime and and all of those things. I'm with you 100%. I love those kind of shows too. And it's really fun in podcasts how they can explore it and just drag it the hell out. Like, you could tell some of these stories in 20 minutes easily. You can tell an abbreviated version, get to the bottom of it. You could ask me 10 questions about it. I could answer it and you'd be done and walk on. And that's that. But that's what they thought too. And they're like, oh no, let's take those 20 questions and turn this into a 15 episode, 41 hour. It did not happen the way that they said it happened. It happened like this. It was the boyfriend with the axe and the guy with the cocaine. That's what happened. Right? That's your true crime story.
It is.
So,
It is. It's so intriguing, So that scratches this itch of mine, and it keeps me down. More than anything, it keeps me awake. It keeps
yeah.
me dialed in. I'm driving. I drive, like easily. Like today, I drove 6 hours. I had to drive to Montgomery, and I had to drive back down to Pensacola, like from the beach. So I spent 6 hours on the road today. So I've got to listen to something that like keeps me alert and thinking and dialed in. So other than
Yeah.
Tigs Bits podcast, which is probably the number one that I can think of to keep you dialed in.
Well, of course. Number one in your minds and number one in your hearts.
Yes,
That's us.
yes. So what's on your list?
One recent that I've discovered it's called Chat GPT with this guy named Jaden Schaefer. Now, is Jaden Schaefer a real human being? Is he AI? I don't know. I think he's a real person, but I know he's a real person. It's a video podcast, and if he's not, then good Lord, we've excelled 5 years into the future. But that stuff's pretty close out there now, where you could do a podcast with created images and created voices and stuff like that. It's not impossible. But it's called Chat GPT with Jaden Schaefer, and he talks about every day. It's a daily podcast about the latest news and happenings around artificial intelligence, and mainly Chat GPT, but he talks about all things AI. Like recently, he's talked about how these fast food places are going to be having automated tellers, or drive-throughs are going to be automated, and soon Wendy's is looking at doing it. There's some other places that are looking at doing it too. So, I mean, that's coming. That will be automated drive-throughs where you walk up or you drive up, and you're no longer talking to that person in Burger King that you can't hear anymore. Wendy's, it's like those days are gone. You're going to actually be able to understand it. The complications that I hear that can come with that are, multiple orders, if you want to make substitutions, changes, things like that. But look, dude, trust me, I work with artificial intelligence every day to create this show and to do everything else that I do in business and with insurance, emails, just everything. I use AI to proofread all kinds of stuff. It's there. Chat GPT, that stuff, it isn't going anywhere. We've talked about that on other shows, and it's here to stay. So Chat GPT with Jaden Schaefer, I hope I'm saying his name right, is fantastic. I love that. And then I've gotten recently into a couple of others. I like comedians. I like to listen to funny stuff. I like to be mindless pretty much whenever I'm not working or anything. If I'm on a walk, I go on a walk pretty much. I go on a walk every day. If I'm not driving somewhere, I'm listening to a podcast, and usually it's something funny, so that I just don't really have to think, and I let my mind kind of just wander off to other things, get a little chuckle here and there. But I listen to Uncle Joey's Joint is one that I've been jamming to a lot here recently. I've known Joey Diaz from years ago and The Sopranos, just a comedy legend, dude, so awesome in his story, but he has a great podcast. I like his podcast. Of course, he's on Joe Rogan and stuff a good bit too. But I love his, and Two Bears, One Cave, which is not anything that's really, it's not a new podcast by any means, but with Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura. Oh man, those two cats are absolutely lunatics. Bert Kreischer, man, he's got a movie coming out called The Machine. I don't know. Are you familiar with those guys? Are you familiar?
No,
with
I'm not. I'm actually writing that down. That's stuff I'm going to have to check out.
Absolutely, check out their show. It's on YouTube. It's a video show, but you can listen to it too on podcast streams and all that. They've created there's multiple shows that go from that one show. There's Not Your Mama's House. There's Two Bears, One Cave. Bert Kreischer has his own show. They're everywhere. They're in your face. They're all over Netflix. Like, where'd these people come from? Well, they've been doing podcasts for a long time, and that's where their fan base came from. They came from podcasts. And but Bert Kreischer has a movie, and I highly, highly suggest. In fact, in the show notes of this podcast, I will have the link to the story there where Bert Kreischer tells the story of him being called the Machine. It is, you have to listen to it. It's like 13 or 14 minutes long. I think it should be an instructional video for life. Dang. It's fantastic. Yeah. It's,
I gotta watch
if you
this.
listen to it, you'll, well, it's not really an instructional video for life. It's what you should not do, but it should be a prerequisite.
That's just as good sometimes, right? Like what not
absolutely.
to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't touch the stove. That's like, tell me what not to do,
Why shouldn't I touch the stove? I know. I learned that the hard way. And that's why we have a podcast now. But anyhow, so Bert Bert has got a movie. Bert Kreischer has a movie coming out. It's called The Machine, and it's got some pretty good actors in it portraying this story that he told, which is a true story. I mean, I'm sure that I'm sure that it's, he seems like the kind of cat that would maybe embellish it just a tinge. So those are some of the newer podcasts that I listen to. The last two not really being new. What are your favorite ones?
For me, this is a little different, right? So this is more of a radio personality, but he got driven to Twitch and YouTube because of his outlandish behavior. I shouldn't say behavior. I should say like the things that he was involved with are so crazy. Like it was too much for radio. And so this is a guy named Bubba the Love Sponge, and he's down in Tampa, and he's from what I think Warsaw, Indiana, originally. He spent time with Howard Stern on that show, and
Okay.
kind of learned under Howard, became really good friends with Howard Stern, and but he moved to Tampa. He's a shock jock, right? So everything he
Yeah.
did is really, but he's such a dude's dude. But he was always pressing everything. So I moved to Tampa in 2011. So when I got there, he was on in the mornings, and it was phenomenal. I was like, this dude's great. Like, he's just talking, he's got crazy guests on. He's good, great friends with Hulk Hogan, and he's just out there doing crazy stuff. And then there was this guy in the afternoon named Mike Calta. They called him Cowhead. And it was like, man, I love this Tampa radio from morning drive to afternoon drive. It was great. But then this radio war started happening between the afternoon guy and Bubba. And Bubba like had somehow like in his video footage in his house, he let Hulk Hogan have sex with his wife, and it was recorded. And then the dude in the afternoon stole that information and then published it. That was that Hulk Hogan sex tape. And so Hulk Hogan ends up making $100 million. Bubba gets run out of the radio, like, because they thought he did it. And it's like, come to find out, it took like 2 years to investigate this. It was the afternoon guy, but the afternoon guy got the morning job, took over, and then Bubba like doubled down and got another show, and then got found guilty like tampering with like Nielsen ratings. He was paying a guy to to listen to the show more, and like they ran him completely out of radio, man. It was like I feel terrible for the cat. I mean, it was because he's such a dude's dude, and his show is so good and he's so intriguing. It's like the guy you want to root for, and you're like, but I had to find him on Twitch in the weirdest places, to like listen to him. But now he's back on radio. I listened to him on Florida Man Radio, and there's multiple. There's Tampa, I think there's Orlando, there's Fort Walton, and luckily I can listen to 103.1 in Fort Walton. I can hear Bubba every morning. So he's building back. But dude, he is like, I mean, like I said, Hulk got 100 million. Bubba got ran out of radio and broke. He lost everything. But dude, you can't help but love this guy. You know what I mean? He's just so entertaining. He's so good. He's so real. But dude, he can't get out of him. He can't get out of his own way. You know what I mean? So it makes you relate with him. Like sometimes you think like how close in life you come to like everything. Oh gosh, everything could just fall apart. And like he does it on radio, but you got to listen to him and you got to search him out a little bit to find him these days. But hey, Howard Stern, I mean, has been to like 2 weddings in his life. One of them was Bubba's wedding. He's got 2 pieces of artwork hanging on his wall, and one of them's Bubba's. He painted an abstract art for him. So, I mean, the cat is highly talented. He's just self-destructive. You know what I mean? But I still like him. I actually like him because of those reasons. So to me, he's like my number one guy that I'd seek out. Like if tomorrow he ended up back in obscurity, and I had to find him on some weird channel, I'm going to listen to him still. So that's my number one guy in the radio business and the like entertainment industry of putting out content. It's Bubba the Love Sponge.
You had sent me some of that Bubba Love Sponge stuff before, and told me a little bit about him. Checked him out. Dude is nuts. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. But very entertaining, sharp as a tack, like you say. Just, I mean, that dude's he's everywhere. So absolutely, I could get more into that.
Yeah, no, he's oddly entertaining, and he's oddly addictive.
I would highly encourage anybody who has a death wish and wants to hear some crazy stuff. I mean that in a good way. Like, I mean, if you just want to hear somebody's life and stories that have just derailed, go to, I mean, your name's Bubba Love Sponge. Bubba the Love Sponge? Or is it
Bubba the Love,
Love
yeah, he's legally has changed his name to Bubba the Love Sponge. His real name I think was Todd Clem, and
Oh, that sucked. I mean, yeah, he had to change that.
he's not a fan of his dad, and so anyway, he changed his name to Bubba the Love Sponge. That's his legal name. His driver's license says it, so that's kind of who he is.
Some of my favorite podcasts. I have 3 that I listen to religiously, like every week. Not all of them because I don't have enough time to hear them all, but every single week I'm going to listen to the Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend podcast. Conan O'Brien is he's my man, and he has been.
Oh, dude, he's so good. He's so good.
My mom and dad were with me, and sometime in the late 90s, my now wife and I were in New York City with my parents, and we got to go to a taping of the Conan O'Brien show. It's the only late night talk show that I've ever been to. We waited in line. We had like reserved tickets for David Letterman. Of course, I wanted to go to Letterman. Who wouldn't want to go to
Worldwide
Letterman?
Pants. Yeah,
absolutely. I went in there, I got a T-shirt from the little store, from the late night store next to it, and then those 2 guys who own that pizza place.
Yep.
I mean, half of the crowd listening to this has no clue of what we're talking about, and that's fine. That's fine, but I don't remember their. I have a picture with them. I wish I could find that. If I do find it before I edit this, I'll pop it up now, but I don't have it. Didn't get in, but I got to go to Conan O'Brien, and I already was a huge fan of him from The Simpsons. I knew he was with The Simpsons, and I knew he was with Saturday Night Live, so I already kind of knew who he was. Then he got the talk show. People did not like him at first at all. People liked him. People like you, our age. We liked him.
I was a big fan of him. I love Conan O'Brien.
Absolutely.
I got him. I got it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Just he's a brilliant mind to begin with. He went to Harvard and he's sharp as a tack, is super smart, but just the funniest person that I've ever seen, heard. The dude makes me roll every day. There's not a show that I don't listen to of his. Not a single show that I listen to that is not one belly laugh at some point in the show. And it's usually at the very beginning because they do a little banner back and forth and just with the people in the studio.
Yeah, they do. No, and I have not listened to podcasts, but I need to check it out.
You absolutely do. They get great guests. They have amazing guests. Of course, it's Conan O'Brien.
Dude, he does it with such good humility as well. You know what I mean?
That's what's
he
so
has that
fun.
balance. He makes fun of himself, and it's like, dude, here's a guy who he is, and he still loves to make fun of himself, and I just find that amazing because most people at that point they stop that. They like anything to do with X, Y, and Z. We're not going to talk about,
No, not him.
Not him.
I mean, he takes it a step further and has a segment called Conan O'Brien. I think it's called Conan O'Brien Finds a Friend, and it's it's just somebody like me or you talking to him over Zoom, and he interviews them in a sense for 15 to 30 minute deal, not too long. Hilarious. I mean, some of the things, and you're absolutely you love listening to it. Like he interviewed a dude who had found some way to trick out the VPNs and all in Iran so he could be on the Conan O'Brien show and the State Department wouldn't kill him basically for being on this show. He went around it. It was hilarious. They disguised his voice and all of that. And that was serious. I mean, he does that kind of stuff. And I was like, this is some kind of a bit. It wasn't a bit. No, it was a real deal. And it was, you could tell it was sincere with some of the language barrier and stuff like that the guy had, but it was fantastic. Just, he's awesome. He's hilarious. The jokes, it's just that is my top notch, absolute end all be all. I would love to be a guest one of those on Conan O'Brien Finds a Friend. If anybody has anything, Conan, if you hear this, I would love to come on. We'll talk shop. It'll be funny or it won't. Let's see what happens. That's my pitch, Conan. That's all. That's all I got. It's terrible, but that.
I think it's perfect.
It is what it is, you know. I mean,
It is what it is.
I ain't gonna try it again. My second one that I listen to weekly, have to, and they're one A, one B, and they could flip flop back and forth. I have to listen to Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and I have to listen to Fly on the Wall with Dana Carvey and David Spade.
Oh my God,
dude, it is unbelievable. All of the Saturday Night Live stories. It's out. She chopped. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the best. And he'll just randomly go into a Dennis Miller, okay, and he can't stop himself.
Dennis Miller. I love Dennis Miller too.
I love Dana Carvey's version of Dennis Miller. Like that is the Dennis Miller to me. Period. It's his impersonation. Nobody does a Dennis Miller better than him. And again, we're kind of aging ourselves on our references because Dennis Miller hasn't really been in the spotlight in a decade, at least. And I mean, but if you're our age, if you're a man of age, then you know who he is. Dana Carvey does some of the most hilarious impressions of all time. He does an amazing Joe Biden. It is spot on. He's got the whisper down, you know, folks, and this all of he's got it down, man. It's
I gotta check that out.
He's freaking
So
Dana Carvey. It's called Fly on the Wall. Fly on the Wall.
I'm writing that down because I love both those guys.
Some of the best. They have all these guests that were on Saturday Night Live or co-host. I mean, they've had Adam Sandler, Lauren Michaels, Will Ferrell. I mean, anybody you could think of, they've had them. They're rolling into, I guess, year 3 almost of the show. And I listen to it every single day whenever I go on a walk or once a week, I should say. It comes out once a week, and
I have to get out of my normal crime dramas and all my seriousness, you know, like trying to solve a case. Like,
sometimes you got to pull yourself out of that. I have to do the same thing. It's so, you know, Dr. Death. Of course I want to listen to Dr. Death for 15 to 18 hours of my life. But at the end of the day, maybe I should laugh a little too, you know, maybe get a little ha-ha, hee out. And that's what that's what Conan O'Brien and Fly on the Wall does for me. And then the third one, and we'll wrap it up at this point. The third one that I listen to virtually weekly, but they run a little long. So it's kind of starting to dive into that JRE kind of, that Joe Rogan experience kind of deal for me, though they're not as long, is Bass Talk Live with Matt Pingrack. But man, it's a great show. It just talks about bass fishing. I mean, it's all you need to know. If you like to bass fish, you're into bass fishing. It's the bass fishing talk show. They have all the latest guests who've won tournaments and, you know, big names in the fishing industry and stuff like that. So if you're into outdoors and especially into bass fishing, it's unbelievable. Bass Talk Live.
Cast per minute. That's actually a thing now in bass fishing. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
There's a ratio there. Like you're trying to work.
Sure,
and
there is.
I was watching a show not too long ago. It was like, man, they really got this down to a science of like numbers and, you know, like
it's ridiculous.
It's crazy. You know?
It's gone too far, in my opinion. That is a whole other show that I will discuss that on. It will not be tonight, but yes, bass fishing has gotten to the point with electronics, with the young anglers that are in the game, the technology that is available that was not available 10, 20 years ago, which has been the case as bass fishing has evolved over time, but it is extremely noticeable now because it just makes a difference. But yeah, it's casts per minute. Everything's dialed in time. They know what spots they're going to go to, all of that type of stuff.
It's that's crazy.
It's dialed into a science. It's crazy, but yeah, we'll save that one for another show. And then a couple of others that I listen to often is Smart List, which these are big national shows. You know, pretty much the ones that I'm listening to. I'm not breaking off into the crazy stuff. These are just my favorites. But Smartless with Jason Bateman and Sean Hayes and Will Arnett is hilarious. They have a lot of awesome guests too. I've noticed that there's a rotation in some of these with Conan O'Brien and Smartless, and some of these that it's the same person comes at. Joe Rogan too. They'll all three get the same guy within 3 weeks occasionally. I don't like those guests. Just being honest, it's like, shit. Well, I already heard him 3 weeks ago on Rogan. I'm not going to sit and listen to him on Conan again, you know. But I get it. I get why they're doing that. And if any of these guests would like to come on Tigs Bits,
love to have them on that fourth week.
Absolutely. And I'll listen to you on all of them. And then I listened to one called Bandsplain. And she explains a band, like you'll take 311 or Metallica or whoever, a band, and she goes into an hour and a half deep dive on their history, how they formed. She explains it's just like me and you talking. It's very casual. Yasi, I think is her name. She's incredible.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. I'm gonna have to check those out, especially that Fly on the Wall.
There's so many little nuggets that I've taken out of Fly on the Wall, and so many little things. I'm a huge Saturday Night Live fan, and always have been. I mean, look behind me. There's Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, and David Spade. Do you think that show may be one of my favorites? I mean, come on. Those guys I'll say it. Those guys are my heroes, like it or not. I looked up to those guys. I still do. But to be able to hear some of those stories that are behind the scenes of those days of Saturday Night Live, of Chris Farley, they have a show that was a 2-hour show that they filmed with multiple guests just talking about Chris Farley. And they talk not all just the good stuff, not just the funny stuff. I mean, Farley had a dark side, you know, wasn't an abuser or anything like that, but he had a dark side. He had a lot of depression and things, you know. I mean, that's why he died. He couldn't get past himself, kind of like Bubba the Love Sponge, except Bubba has lived, you know, which is a testament. And a testimony to him that he's been able to move forward with his life with all these bad things that have happened to him. But it's also part of what makes him so good. I wish Farley could have held on, man. I really, really do, because I would have loved to have seen what he would have done. One of the things that I learned in Fly on the Wall with Chris Farley is that some of these blockbuster movies that you saw in the early 90s, mid-90s, really after Tommy Boy and things like that, some dramas, those parts were made for him. Of course, he never got to play them, and it's super disappointing. You can look all that stuff up and see all that, but Fly on the Wall, man, I mean, the stories, the guests, the impersonations, it's well worth your time. And one of the reasons why it's one of the top ranked podcasts in the world. But it's, man, if you like Saturday Night Live, and especially if you like that 90s, early 90s to mid 90s Saturday Night Live, some of you guys weren't even born then, but I mean, that's where it's at. That's where the prime time, that was where the best of the best, cream of the crop of SNL was in that era. And these are two guys that lived it, and they know all the people behind the scenes and all that.
Yeah.
Just totally check it out.
Yeah, I got to check that out for sure.
Well, man, look, I think that ought to wrap it up. A show about podcasts, man. So, look, I would encourage everybody to check some of these out. Threw a bunch of names out at you. I'm going to put the links in the show notes if you watch this on YouTube. If you listen to it on Spotify or Facebook or any of the social media platforms, don't forget to subscribe, give it a like, share it. You thought this episode was kind of funny, or you got any kind of value out of it whatsoever, which, I mean, I think I got some value out of it, Chad.
No,
so I would share this.
Fly on the Wall
is
coming my way.
Good. We'll share it. Appreciate everybody, and we'll see you next week.